Mr. Speaker, I just want to now introduce someone who is from Indiana's 9th Congressional District. He has been a real partner for repealing the device tax on the Ways and Means Committee. He's a pro-growth economic advocate for creating jobs, and Indiana as a state, I think, has about 20,000 medical device jobs, and this is near and dear, I think, to his heart as well, and so I, with great pleasure, have a chance to yield to Mr. Young from Indiana.
Well, thank you so much. I thank the gentleman for his leadership on this issue, a bipartisan issue. And I am encouraged to see so many colleagues on both sides of the aisle be here with us this evening to speak out, to encourage our leadership, to encourage our fellow members to stay engaged on this. You know, in the end, this is about improving lives. This is about delivering innovation within one of our highest growth economic sectors so that lives can be changed in a very positive way. And to bring this sort of down to earth here, aside from the very important economic statistics that we'll be citing this evening related to jobs and economic growth and losses and revenue, aside from the stories that we're going to hear this evening about manufacturing facilities being moved overseas, plans to build them no longer in the Midwest in a place like Indiana. Instead, Europe is a better place to do business. Let's set all that aside just for a moment and talk about one individual. This young lady, her name is Sheila Fraser. Now, Sheila is a Hoosier, and she testified at a field hearing on the device tax and its impact on the individuals who benefit from medical devices and on businesses. This field hearing was held in Indianapolis a couple of years back, and Mr. Paulson helped convene it, and we appreciated that. But Sheila testified that at age 10, she was diagnosed with bone cancer in her leg. She was an elite athlete for her age, playing gymnastics and track, and one day she just woke up facing the prospect of amputation, of all things, at age 10. Biomet, a company out of Indiana, made a custom device for Sheila designed to expand as she grew and to replace the diseased bone while saving her leg. Now today, Sheila's much older. She leads a normal, active life. When we first met, she was a senior at Marion High School in Mishawaka, Indiana. Her courses were geared for college preparation. She received honors for a GPA of 3.5 or above. She's a member of the National Honor Society. Now, Ms. Fraser, no doubt, has a bright future ahead of her. We have to wonder how differently her life might be were it not for the innovation that occurred at that Indiana medical device company. Innovation in devices changes lives. Thousands of lives every year across this country. She's just one remarkable example of all the people that benefit from these devices. And without this type of innovation, let's think about what Sheila's life would look like. Well, she'd be physically disabled. She'd face a future of sky-high healthcare costs. Who knows what sort of opportunities she wouldn't be able to seize as a result of the innovations that came out of Biomet, just one company. Now, taxing companies that rely so much on research and development and are positively impacting so many lives, it makes absolutely no sense to me. And the only way I can make any measure of sense out of it is something that my good colleague from the other side of the aisle, Mr. Matheson, said earlier. This medical device surtax wasn't included in the Affordable Care Act, what the President calls Obamacare, for any sort of policy reason. It was just put in to raise revenue. There was no real consideration when this bill was passed about how to make the bill sustainable from a fiscal standpoint. Instead, it was an insurance coverage bill, and they were going to figure out some of the financials later. And so this was one effort, I think, to mitigate the cost of the bill. We've discovered that it's just incredibly costly in other ways, though. The opportunity costs that will be borne by people like Sheila Fraser if this innovation doesn't occur. So for Sheila And for millions of Americans, tens of millions of people around the world that benefit from these devices, I think we owe it to them to repeal this medical device tax, a very bipartisan issue, a bicameral issue. My constituents are demanding it. The American people are increasingly demanding it across the country. And so I just look forward to getting this done in conjunction with those here and others in this body. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I look forward to continue working with you to repeal this device tax. And as you laid out so eloquently, I had a chance to come to Indiana, and I heard the same exact story from a young girl impacted and affected positively by the value of medical technology and medical innovation. And unfortunately, now that's under threat for our own patients, providing that type of access. And Mr. Speaker, the larger companies, they'll cut back on their research and development. But as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of small companies in my district and in Congressman Young's district in Indiana in particular, because I've had a chance to visit some of these companies in Indiana. And many of these employees, 80% of these companies are small business. They've got 50 employees or less, Mr. Speaker, 50 employees or less. And many of these companies, when they start out, it takes 8 to 10 years to become profitable. They just don't see a profit in the first couple of years. They need to attract venture capital. They need to attract investors. They need to convince investors that it is worth the investment. And when you tax revenue, many of these companies, by the way, are burning $500,000 to $1 million a month just to bring their product forward, go through the clinical trials, get approval in the FDA, and then have success in the market. That's a big challenge. And 8 to 10 years to become profitable, sometimes even longer. We've raised the hurdle now with this tax because it's a tax on sales. We've raised the bar. We've made it that much tougher to become profitable. So you know what? There are going to be fewer investors in these companies. There are going to be less of them. When you've got less small companies being developed, what does that mean? You're not going to have breakthrough technologies. You're not going to have in-the-garage inventions, in-the-backyard inventions. And by the way, a lot of larger medical device companies, through acquisition, they look for these small companies. They look for the innovators. They acquire them, and it grows their operations larger. So that's a challenge as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Young, I remember when I was in Indiana with you, we can share some more stories, but this is clearly something that is an ongoing frustration, I think, for investment in this industry.
This hits very close to home because for every Zimmer or Biomet I visit in the state of Indiana, there have to be 4 or 5 small businesses, fledgling businesses that aspire to become the next Zimmer or Biomed of the world. And, we're inhibiting with this device tax their future growth, their research efforts, the lean years when they're just trying to get a product approved into market. And with entrepreneurship at a 15-year low, we need to be doing everything conceivable to incentivize people to start businesses, to grow jobs, to increase personal incomes, which is exactly what this medical device sector has done in recent years. But it's all in jeopardy as a result of this surtax. I'm in the mood this evening to tell stories, so you've opened the door there, my good friend Mr. Paulson of Minnesota, and so let me share with you another story about innovation in this sector. There was a young college student out of Northwestern University. He dreamed one day of becoming a doctor. So he did very well in school, studied incredibly hard. When he graduated, the U.S. military came calling, and he was brought into the service against his will, drafted, served his time as a medical technician. Well, he got married later, and they had children, and one thing led to another. They ended up moving to my hometown of Bloomington, Indiana. And so this once aspiring doctor did what so many Americans decide to do. They didn't give up on their dreams. So he and his wife, they decided to try and make a difference in the area of medicine in their own little way. He started tinkering with some wire guides in a spare bedroom of their apartment in Bloomington. Eventually, this turned into a small business, a profitable business, and they were able to hire other people and move out of the spare bedroom. And in later years, this company would grow to become the largest privately held medical device company in the world, the Cook Group, headquartered in Bloomington, Indiana. Its founder was Bill Cook and his wife Gail, who survives him. They've created thousands of jobs, not just in Bloomington, but around the state of Indiana, all around the Midwest, and now they're creating them in Europe. They're creating them in Europe not because they want to. In fact, there were plans, I'm told, for a number of manufacturing facilities to be built in America's Midwest. But because of our regulatory burdens and more importantly, this medical device surtax, the plans were changed. And those manufacturing facilities are now going to be constructed and jobs created in Europe because that's a better place to do business when they looked at their financials. You know, they tried hard. They resisted making this decision, but their federal government pushed them in this direction. You know, there's still an opportunity to salvage so many jobs, to rescue this great American industry that's really in its early stages of development. We must repeal this medical device tax. This is a no-brainer, as my oldest child says. It's a bipartisan issue. So I'm really encouraged to see Republicans and Democrats down here this evening trying to ensure that the next Cook Group can be created. The next Cook Group won't be strangled in the cradle during its early formative years when it's trying to get cash flow positive. And I'm glad we're getting out the word tonight to the American people on this important issue.
Boy, I thank the gentleman. I remember being in Indiana and also having a chance to talk to Cook Medical, and great success story without a doubt, located right there in the heartland. And I do remember, though, as with their concerns of the looming tax that was on its way, and they were pretty clear. They're like, look, we've got the opportunity to build new factories, new innovative headquarter operations. We're not going to do it in the United States with this tax facing us right now. We're not going to do it. We're going to expand elsewhere. And unfortunately, we heard tonight how other companies in some districts have moved to Costa Rica. So we are literally sending high-quality jobs offshore, jobs that should be here in the United States. Mr. Speaker, I want to mention one other thing, and my colleague from the Ways and Means Committee, I think, can comment on this a little bit as well. But there's no doubt this is about less invasive technology. This is about keeping people out of the hospital. It's about keeping health care and lowering health care costs. And this is a very complicated tax. This is not just a simple tax. It's collected every 2 weeks, every single 2 weeks. And so a $30 billion tax, it's actually very extremely challenging for companies to figure out how they're going to collect the tax. It's pretty onerous. So it's more complicated than a typical excise tax. It's regulated by the IRS. Of course, the complexity and the difficulty in developing these regulations for the tax actually underscores that an excise tax is a very blunt and a very damaging instrument that's being applied to a very highly innovative and dynamic industry, which you just talked about. And the compliance costs alone are very hard, as we've learned in the Ways and Means Committee.
They are indeed, and the numbers add up quickly. You know, right now we're looking at, you indicated we're looking at a semi-monthly payment of this tax by our device companies. Roughly $100 million is due to the Internal Revenue Service semi-monthly as a result of this tax, and those numbers add up quickly. So, so far, in fiscal year 2013, the tax has already cost device manufacturers nearly $2 billion. And next year is looking even worse. Next fiscal year, starting October 1, the device tax is projected to cost manufacturers over $2.5 billion. So, you know, this, once again, these taxes are not just being paid by the large companies. They're being paid by companies that are drawing on all their financial wherewithal, all the venture capital they can find, all their personal savings, all the community bank loans they may be able to get during these rough times. Those monies are being used to with a threadbare budget to research and develop these technologies into something that can finally make their way to the market. And all the while, Uncle Sam is taxing away any profits they might be realizing on another product that may already be at market. So this is absolutely something that is a disincentive to innovation. It undermines job creation at a time that all politicians are talking about creating jobs and saving the middle class. These are good paying jobs, manufacturing jobs, which you started off talking about. We need to be creating more manufacturing jobs here in the United States. So these pay better than your median or your average wage in a given state. And this is why we have 79 supporters in the United States Senate, Republican and Democrat, and I think perhaps an independent in there, one never knows, that might favor repealing this device tax. And here in the House, we have 260 co-sponsors for repealing the device tax, Republican and Democrat. So let's get it done.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to mention one other thing that I think is important as well, and that's that, as my colleague mentioned, 79 senators. We know 79 senators support repealing this device tax. The challenge is with the Senate leadership. We need these rank and file members to pressure the Senate leadership to also bring this up for a vote. We can do this in the House at any time. We'll likely be doing that sometime this fall as a part of the other budget negotiations and discussions, but we've got to make sure that our bipartisan efforts continue to pressure our leadership to act on this and convince the White House this is a top priority. My colleague would agree, I would assume.
I would absolutely agree, and I'd throw another wrinkle into this conversation. We need to be identifying ways to control health care costs. Whatever one thinks of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, as the President's health care law is known, we're not here to discuss the larger law, but to the extent we figure out can incorporate into our policies cost-saving measures that still maintain the quality of care that Americans have grown to expect from our medical system, that allows us to reduce the burden of taxation. So I think those who are enamored of this law need to reflect on this litany of different taxes that has been put into place in order to pay for it. Many of them, I believe, unwise, but this one is particularly unwise, and that's why we have so much bipartisan support behind its repeal.